Alrighty, what is going on, everybody? My name's Blitzwinger, and ladies and gents, this is finally the video in which I will give you guys my opinions and thoughts about the Nintendo Switch. I've been asked about this thing for quite a few days now, even prior to the Nintendo Switch event, but I wanted to go on ahead and wait for a few days after the event because we did get a lot extra information from people who got to be in the New York event and got to actually play with the Switch and got impressions of the device itself. And then additionally to that, we just got a few extra additional pieces of information that weren't discovered right when the event was over. So that's why I really did want to wait a few days and kind of, comprise is what I meant to say, a lot of elements together so that then they feel a little bit more conclusive as far as the final product that we are discussing. So, of course, if you aren't aware, the Nintendo Switch was just announced. It's Nintendo's new home/portable console. The biggest gimmick for this console, or I don't even know if you want to use that word necessarily, but the thing that is supposed to be its selling point is that it is a crossover console. It is a console that will be able to allow you to play at home using the portable dock. So you'll be able to actually place the portable console and place it into the dock, which then allows you to dock the console inside and then go on ahead and play at home just like you would with any other home console previously. However, if you choose to go on ahead and go portable, you can lift the console out of the dock and then up and away you go with the console in hand where you will be able to play portably. So, that's a little bit of context as far as the machine itself. I also wanted to give you guys a little bit of context as far as where I come from as a fan of Nintendo. So I want to be very, very clear that I am definitely a fan, especially of their games and a lot of their IP, but I am certainly not a fan of a lot of their decision making. So I think that I'm hopefully going to have a balanced opinion, but the thing is, as always, of course, I'd love to hear from you guys as well. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of the decision making that Nintendo made for the Nintendo Switch and whether or not you guys are excited, not excited, and whether or not you guys have certain elements that you agree or disagree with me, because it'd be really cool to get an informative and awesome mature discussion going, because we don't want to be just yelling at one another like, oh my god, Nintendo's the best. No, it is not. It is complete hot garbage. It's like, let's just have a bit of a more civil conversation about this. But with that all in mind, ladies and gentlemen, let's get rocking and rolling. So the way that I wanted to go on ahead and layer this out is really kind of give you guys an idea of, first and foremost, what I think of the good things that they did, and then some of the bad things that they did, and then ultimately conclude this thing with whether or not I will be purchasing a Switch. And I think that that will be a pretty natural flow to the conversation. So first and foremost, the most positive elements that I can discuss is, of course, the Nintendo IP, because the big IP that we saw revealed at the conference, which was, of course, Zelda and Mario Odyssey, or I should say Zelda Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, looked spectacular. They look absolutely awesome. They definitely, once again, have that quality element that Nintendo games usually tend to have. I know that a lot of people disagree even with that statement nowadays, because if we look back, especially like 2016 and 2015, there were definitely a few games like, the newest Mario Party was a little bit of a tumble. A lot of people weren't big fans of the Metroid Federation Force, not Fusion Force game as well. So I definitely understand that notion, but what I will say is that generally speaking, in my opinion, Nintendo makes great games, and that's usually the case. So as far as their IP, I think that is definitely a positive, because they did show a lot of respect and love to those franchises that needed to be shown in a good light. So that was great. Of course, a lot of people are also saying, hey, what about the Metroid? And what about, other franchises that we could bring up from the past that did not get shown? Or how about what was the treatment like for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? That wasn't really well done. But what I will say is that I think they did a very good job at showing us two big titles, and then a lot of people weren't big fans of, for example, ARMS, and weren't big fans of the amount of time that 1-2 Switch got. So for me, the way I'm coming at this as somebody who has studied business and went to school for business, I absolutely understand the idea of showing 1-2 switch, because that is exactly the kind of thing that they're going to try to demo at, like, Jimmy Kimmel and all of these like Tonight shows. It's something that you can show that looks really fun and hilarious. It's for gamers and for hardcore gamers. Let's be honest, for us, it'll probably be really fun for like 20 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute for each one of those mini games. And then most likely that will die down. I'm not saying it will necessarily, because I think it's going to definitely draw a pretty good comparison to Wii Sports, which was a pack-in with the Wii, if you recall. And a lot of people kept playing that even after the Wii was out for ages. So I think that it will draw a similar parallel. Now, here's where the issue comes in with that particular title, and that is the fact that it is actually going to be full price. Now, that I think is kind of their first big mistake. I think that if there was a way to do it, I think Nintendo should have packed in 1-2 Switch into the actual box. I think maybe what they could have done is maybe even sold you like some sort of a demo disc that only had like 4 or 5 of those mini games, and then additionally to that, they could be like, hey, and you could get the full 1-2-3 Switch or whatever the heck they want to call it as a separate game, or like as downloadable content or something like that. I think that would have been a far smarter way to go about things, because I always am a big fan of a pack-in game, especially for a console that is trying to be different from the other consoles in the marketplace. I think it would be very clever for them to have something that really sets them apart and gives everyone else kind of an idea like, okay, so this is really what this console is about. It's a lot more about like fun, using the gimmick that is included in the package, and really kind of exemplifies the technology in a somewhat good light. Because this was another big positive, was the fact that people who played the 1-2 Switch minigames at the New York event mostly spoke somewhat well of it. They said, hey, yeah, I understand its appeal. It's going to be fun. It's going to be one of those things that, like, when you have friends come over and you want to demo the system, it's something that you could very quickly explain. It's relatively simple to get a grasp of, and it's hilarious to watch others failing and like doing the crazy mini games that are available in the game. Now, with that out of the way, I want to move right along to ARMS, which was the game that I think a lot of people were kind of like, what the heck? That is terrible. I think that the notion of why maybe that game looked terrible is because of what we saw. I think they kind of didn't do a very good job of showing us why that is a full retail price game. But I also think that this game has the possibility of doing to fighting games what Splatoon did to shooting games, where I think when a lot of people, including myself even, when we saw Splatoon, we kind of thought like, oh, that's going to be full price? Like, really? Wow, okay, that's kind of surprising. But then it ended up doing really, really well. And for me personally, someone who has played Splatoon for quite a while, I enjoyed the heck out of it. And I honestly, it's one of those games that I always like, that, Destiny, there's a couple of other games that I'm always like, oh, I really want to play more of that and I want to get back into it. But the problem is, when the community gets so far ahead of you, it's really tough to jump back in and pick up and do and be competitive with everyone else. So I think that for me, ARMS looks really, really, really fun. My only big concern for ARMS is the delay on the network that they have, because it is a fighting game, quote unquote, and I'm really worried about lag and not having really great connections affecting that to a very, very great extent. So I'm hopeful that there is like a single player component. I'm hopeful that there's some sort of like a training component as well, where you could play against like the CPU on a harder difficulty, so that people who might not have the greatest internet connection still can play the game and play it in a fun and competent manner. So I think that could be really, really, really cool if it's executed beyond just, hey, here's this number of characters and just go online and battle against one another. So overall, I'm very hopeful for ARMS, and my hope comes directly from Splatoon, because I think that, first of all, it's exciting that Nintendo is getting behind a new IP. I understand the notion of like, hey, I want Metroid and I want Zelda and I want Mario. I'm absolutely in that boat. I get that. But I'm going to be honest, I think Splatoon is excellent, and I'm so happy that we're going to be getting Splatoon 2. So with that in mind, let's transition right to Splatoon 2, because I want to talk about that. It definitely doesn't feel like a fully fledged sequel. I think a lot of people are feeling that kind of vibe from it, where it almost feels like they wanted to make like a remaster, but at the same time they were like, well, I don't know if we want to have so many remasters. We're going to get people like annoyed at us for that. So why don't we just make a full-on sequel? So I think that there is definitely definitely going to be a little bit of that feeling to this game. Like, I don't think it's going to be like this like grandiose change from the first game, but if it's something that really like polishes up, no pun intended, and polishes up the actual experience from the first game, and then gives you more weapons, more maps, and more character aesthetics and character designs and customizations, I think that's going to be awesome. So I don't really see how that could be a bad thing necessarily. And plus, look, a lot of people played Splatoon 1, but with the hopeful success of the Switch, the franchise of Splatoon could definitely take off and become a prominent household name type title, just like a lot of these other titles. Like, to me, I think that Splatoon could be on par with those other titles if they keep building it up and treating it with the respect that they did the first one. So I'm very, very, very hopeful of that. And considering how much time I got in the presentation, I think that will be the case. So, final two software titles that I'm going to discuss are going to be Mario Odyssey, which is supposedly coming in the fall season, or holiday, season of 2017. So that will be kind of the big holiday game for the Nintendo Switch. I think that makes sense. I know a lot of people weren't too happy about that and said like, hey, they should have just launched with the Mario and Zelda together. I think that would have been awesome. I agree with that. That would have been like a crazy 1-2 punch, especially because most launches for consoles aren't particularly huge as far as like first party exclusives go. Like, I know you could make the argument that the PS4 had Knack and it had Killzone Shadowfall, but relatively speaking, let's put it this way, like Knack and Killzone are not the same size as like Zelda and Mario, clearly. So I think that it would have been like really exciting if they had a Zelda and a huge Mario game out right as the console is launching. But I think they would have probably run into the problem that they are having now, except it would have been in the holiday of 2017, because people would be complaining, saying like, hey, why are there no big games? What's my big game to play in the holiday season? I think that is kind of the logic behind the decision that they made with launching only with Zelda and holding off on Odyssey until the holiday season of 2017. Now, I know what you're saying. Why didn't they just hold off then, sell the console in the holiday season? I think maybe they were, first of all, worried about the Scorpio. Second of all, maybe there's some concern about like, hey, when you're in the holiday season, you're competing with all those other games as well. You're definitely in March going to be competing in a pretty highly competitive window as well, because you've got like, For Honor and Horizon Zero Dawn. There really are a lot of games coming out now in the spring as well. So it is a bit of a weird decision, like as far as where they positioned it. But I will put it this way, like I think that a lot of times us as gamers, we kind of like just jump to conclusions. But I don't know, like I'm not sure exactly what would be the logic behind it, but I bet you that there is some sort of a business decision that was made as a result of making the launch happen at that date, because I'm guessing it's something along the lines of either meeting some sort of a quarterly quota or something like that. It could have been some sort of a pressure from investors, like internal, discussions and such. There could have been an element of where like, hey, 2016 was pretty rough for Nintendo as far as like finances go, so they gotta get something out there, and possibly what I'm guessing is really forcing that is Zelda, because had they not launched in March with the Switch, then they would have to probably, I'm guessing, launch Zelda at some point in the spring. They didn't want to have to wait on Zelda to be so far late into the year. So I'm guessing that is somewhat of an explanation as to why it is launching when it is launching, but that's kind of the best that we can do. Of course, we don't have insight into, behind closed doors meetings or anything like that. So we don't know necessarily why that decision was made, but we can certainly speculate to a certain extent as to why things are unfolding the way they are. And of course, give our 2 cents as far as like, hey, do we agree with that or disagree with that, and so on and so forth. So this kind of wraps up my portion about the software. And I really did, obviously, as I said before, approach the concept of like positives and negatives, kind of blending them back and forth from one to another as far as the software goes. So again, my final kind of 2 cents on the software lineup is that I think there is definitely a very weak launch lineup, but I think that really comes from probably issues with Nintendo convincing third parties to support this thing, because I will say, like, if we added on to this particular launch lineup a few of the big hitters that are going to be coming out on the PS4 and the Xbox One. Like, if let's say they came out and they said, hey, Resident Evil 7, it's going to be on the Switch as well on launch day, and For Honor is going to be on the Switch on launch day, and they added a few of those big hitters that are third-party support titles, I think this launch lineup would look terrific. Like, it wouldn't even look good, it would look awesome. So hopefully they're able to actually sell enough of these things to where publishers will look at the Switch as an actual viable option to release their games on, because again, a lot of big hitters this year that are going to be coming out on the PS4 and the Xbox One are not going to be coming out on the Switch. At least we don't have any confirmation of them coming out on the Switch. So that's a bit unfortunate. Again, would have loved to see something like Injustice 2, let's say, confirmed for the Switch. That would have been a really cool and awesome surprise. So that is as far as the software side of things goes. Now let's talk about the hardware. Of course, I gave you an idea about the actual console and so on and so forth. From what I could tell, the biggest positive that we can discuss is that the preview event that happened in New York City, where a lot of people, journalists from whether it be actual publications, whether it be from video game websites, or even YouTubers who got to play the actual console, said really, really good things about it. They said that the actual materials and the feel of playing the games felt great. It felt like a really good device, which is definitely, obviously, a pretty awesome element to talk about. That is definitely, I think, the biggest kind of feather in its cap, is the fact that it seemed to be a really fun device to play and that things felt intuitive. They felt like the technology itself worked really well. So I think that is the biggest hoorah that we can have for this particular machine. Now, let's talk about the price. The price is, of course, $299.99 MSRP as far as the US is concerned. Of course, that is $399 in Canada. I think it's going to be $299 in the UK as well, and I think it's 29,000 or something like that yen in Japan. So I'm not exactly certain on all the prices across the board, but you can look that up as well. But $299 is a little bit higher than I think most people were hoping for, and that's really the biggest issue with the Nintendo Switch is pricing, because when we talk about the console, a lot of people were kind of like, $299 is like $50, a bit more than what I was hoping for. But you know what? It's okay. Like, I'm willing to, let's say, double down on this thing. However, the issue really came in when you start talking about all the other things included for the Switch. So let's start with the Pro Controller, which is going to be $70. So that is it is insane, because it actually has a higher cost than the DualShock or the Xbox One controller. So that is really weird that the DualShock 4 and the Xbox One controllers are cheaper to manufacture than the Switch Pro Controller. The only explanation I have for that is maybe some sort of like economies of scale in terms of just how much Sony and Microsoft is able to order, like the quantity, the sheer amount that they order allows them to have a better, more efficient price to work with, or maybe just due to the fact that their designs are better worked out or something along those lines. Now, what I will say is that people who did have their hands on the Pro Controller did say that it felt a lot more hefty than the Pro Controller that was on the Wii U, because my mind right away jumped to my Wii U controller, my Pro Controller, and I was like, that thing, you can't charge $70 for that. Like, it does not feel that sturdy. So I was like very concerned right off the bat. But then people who actually played it, they said it has a very good HD rumble pack included, motion controls. So that's really cool. And then of course it does have the built-in amiibo functionality. So like it can scan amiibos in. So I'm guessing all of those little pieces added up to a bigger price tag. I still don't justify it. I think that if Nintendo could have taken a hit on this particular element and this particular accessory, I think they should have done so, especially because they're building up the Switch as something that you should be sharing with others in person, like having friends come over, have their Switch, or like buy a controller for them or something. You got to be able to then make those accessories, those controllers, accessible and make them at a price point where people are incentivized to be like, hey, yeah, I should go get a couple more of those Pro controllers and have friends come over and play Mario Kart or something along those lines. So I think that that was a little bit of a weird decision. Speaking of way too expensive, this is a perfect segue to the JoyCon controllers. So the JoyCon controllers are going to be sold in two different ways. And what I mean by that is two different packages. So you can either buy the 2-pack where you're going to have two JoyCon controllers, a left and a right away. They're going to be available, I think, in 4 different color combinations. So you're going to have the gray, 2 red ones, the neon combination, which is 1 red and 1 blue, and then 2 blue Joy-Cons. So that's going to be kind of the different methods by which you can buy the controllers. But I am very, very shocked by the price of this thing. It is $79.99. Now, keep in mind, this is all US pricing. So in parts of the world, this is going to be higher. In some parts, it might be a little bit lower, but that is insane. That is so expensive. That is absolutely crazy that they're charging $80 for these Joy-Con controllers. But I know what you're saying. Oh, what if I only need one, like the left or the right? Well, lucky for you, they're going to be selling them that way as well, but they're $50. Like, what? That is insane. That is so expensive. I'm guessing that, again, due to the technology that they're using in these things, which, again, the people who had their hands on this stuff, they did say that, for example, when they were like playing 1-2 Switch, you could definitely feel like you could tell like there was a certain number of ice cubes inside the controller and everything. So that sounds really compelling, but as someone who didn't have his hands on the controllers, I don't know how compelling that technology might be at $80. That just sounds ludicrous. Like, the charging for the controller, of the Pro controller, I should say, of $70 is pretty crazy as it is. But then charging even more for the actual Joy-Cons is just absolutely crazy. Like, I don't know how this is going to do. I'm guessing it's not going to be very successful, and I'm very hopeful that this price drops as quickly as possible. I think that at $60, it would have been a very fair price. I think a lot of people could justify that. Like, hey, you pay $30 for each one of them. I think that would be really great. They could charge $35 for the individual package, or again, give you $60 the 2 Joy-Cons together. I think that would have been more than fair, especially because, again, it's very difficult sometimes for any one of us to judge something without having had it in our own hands, because I'm guessing that the technology has a lot more to it than we actually realize. But at the same time, we have to judge it on what it is. They're tiny little controllers that ultimately you're charging $40 for each one of them, or $50 if you buy them individually. That is crazy. So I think that this is one of those things that I'm very hopeful will price drop very quickly, and therefore make them a lot more accessible. We'll see. I guess time will tell, because Nintendo is not particularly known for wanting to do price drops on hardware, especially if it's not necessary. Like, if it sells well enough, they're probably going to maintain this price for the time being. But I just think it's quite pricey. And for something that is going to be portable, you know that people are going to be losing those things, especially if you're a kid. Like, if you're going to take those Joy-Cons and you drop one, that's like your parent has to go out and pay $50 for just replacing one of them. And if, let's say, you want to get both of them replaced, you're talking about an additional $80. Like, that is a really expensive replacement cost. So I'm very hopeful that this thing price drops as quickly as possible. So let me quickly run down a couple of the other elements. So we also have the Joy-Con charging grip, which is essentially a charging station that you hold on to that works like a controller, basically. And this thing is going to be $30. Again, feels a little bit pricey, especially for something that is essentially a plastic clamshell that is just basically going to house the Joy-Cons themselves. I think that's somewhat weird as well to charge $30 for something like that. But at the same time, like $30 for this compared to $80 for the Joy-Cons, you're like, oh, I guess that's pretty fair, So maybe that was their strategy. They're like, hey, let's just overprice the Joy-Cons so that then all our other accessories can be overpriced and not look so ludicrous. So maybe that's the possibility or the strategy that they're going with there. Now, then we have the Joy-Con wheel, which actually is going to be a set of 2. So it's essentially the same thing that we saw on the Wii, where you could take your actual Wiimote and place it inside of a plastic remote wheel and use it for racing games. So it's primarily probably going to do very well with things like Mario Kart. So if this is available on store shelves when Mario Kart comes out, I think it will probably do relatively well, especially because it's only going to be $15. So I think that's a fair price for something that is 2 essentially sculpted pieces of plastic that fit the controller. So I think that's not a bad idea whatsoever. Now, here is the final element that people are very, very upset about, and that is the Nintendo Switch dock set. So this thing is going to be $90, and it is essentially the docking station into which you're going to be able to go on ahead and place the actual Nintendo Switch console, slide it in, and then of course use it on your television screen. So a lot of people are very, very, very upset about this as well, because it is $90 for what is essentially being talked about as just a placeholder or like a battery charging station for the console. I don't know if that's all there is to it, because to be fair, when the Nintendo Switch is docked, it does gain an additional power and it is able to display at a higher resolution. So I'm guessing that has to have some sort of like cooling or some sort of like either like a boost system or something like that available inside it. So I don't think it's just a hollow piece of plastic. I think that people who are saying that are exaggerating, and I think that, well, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, because again, I didn't have my hands on it, so I could be wrong, but I just doubt that they would be able to charge $90 for something that is literally a piece of plastic into which you just like connect the dock, and it just has power coming into it and an HDMI cord. I don't know that that would be possible to sell people on, especially at $90. But what I will say is that I could totally see people actually buying this thing, especially if the Switch does well enough. Like I could totally see someone who, let's say, goes to like their grandparents' house or has family somewhere else. You could get yourself a dock set, keep it there, then have one at home, and then as you're playing the console portably while you're on your way to your destination, like let's say you're for the holidays, right? You're going to visit your grandma or someone, and you leave one of the dock sets there. Once you get there, you dock your console and away you go. You can play it there. So I think it's actually a pretty cool idea. I do agree that, the price is a little bit high. I wish it was like $70. I think that would have been a much better, more competitive price point, especially because, again, I think that there's more to this thing than just the actual like clamshell that houses the console. I think that there has to be some sort of technological component to it as well. It can't just be a pure plastic piece that has nothing but the functionality of charging essentially the console. So I think there's a bit more to it than that. So ultimately, with all this mumbo jumbo out of the way, are you getting one? Yes, I will be getting a Switch because I really, really do want to go on ahead and play the Zelda Breath of the Wild game in its best possible version, because, again, I know people are saying, well, it's going to run just as well on the Wii U. I doubt it. This thing is more powerful than the Wii U, so I am like 99.9% certain that it will run better on the Switch. So I want to play Zelda at its best possible resolution and frames, or frames per second, so that it actually looks smooth and the experience is as good as it possibly can be. But I also absolutely understand how people would not justify purchasing the Nintendo Switch at launch, because there is really quite a few titles to only get at launch. So I understand where people are coming from. Absolutely. I am not like one of those people who's like, oh, you're an idiot for not buying this thing at launch, or you're an idiot for buying it at launch. I think that it's really an individual choice. Like if you want to and can afford to get it and you would like to get it, I think that you're going to. So I don't know if someone like me could like sway you one way or another. But all I know is that looking at the Switch into 2017, there is enough compelling software there for me. Like for me, if Splatoon 2 was a launch title, I would have been like over the moon. That, like, I cannot wait for summer so that I have the sequel for Splatoon to play. Then additionally to that, I'm actually really excited about ARMS. I think that 1-2 Switch is going to be hilarious to play with like family members and friends, and just like having people ridicule one another. It's going to be pretty funny to watch and such. So I think that will be a pretty fun experience. Zelda hopefully will take everyone's breath away with a title like that, Breath of the Wild. Hopefully it will be awesome and won't be a disappointment. That's another thing that, of course, no one is really discussing, and that is that Zelda better be amazing, because that would be a giant mess if Zelda is not exceptionally well done. I mean, there really isn't too much grounds to speak of as far as like, hey, Zelda being a poor game or anything like that, but I just think that that would be such a huge negative blow if the game is nothing but awesome. Like, it has to be great, and it looks great, except for the English dub. I will say that much. I don't know why. I'm not a big fan of the English dub. I hope we can play with Japanese dub and English subtitles in the US. That would be a really cool touch. So, with all of this in mind, guys, here it is, a half-hour impressions video on the Nintendo Switch. I gave you guys kind of a pretty good idea as far as like everything that I think of it, everything that I thought of the software, everything that I think of the software, and where we currently stand as I'm recording this on January 17th of 2017. So keep in mind, yes, I did just kind of date the video, but I don't know what will be revealed. Let's say a week from now, we get some news about like, hey, there's another 5 launch titles that are coming out. I wanted to wait for another like few days. That's why I didn't make this video right away, because I was like hopeful there would be more stuff that gets announced. We got a little bit more of a clear understanding of what's coming, but what I'm getting at is if you're watching this video after we have more information about games that are coming to the console at launch and like big titles or something like that that gets confirmed, I didn't have a clue about that at this time, so I wasn't able to comment on it in any significant manner. So with that in mind, ladies and gents, let me know what you guys think. Are you excited about the Nintendo Switch? Yay or nay? What are you thinking about Zelda, ARMS, 1-2 Switch, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which I haven't even talked about, but of course, that will be coming out as well, so that's pretty cool. Splatoon, Snipper Clips maybe one of the smaller games like Has Been Heroes or Ultra Street Fighter 2 or Minecraft Story Mode and so on and so forth. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. I'm looking forward to getting an awesome discussion going. I am sorry that the video turned out as long as it did, but I, of course, did want to be very thorough and give you guys an in-depth opinion about the Nintendo Switch. Thank you guys so very much for watching today's video. I hope to see each and every single one of you lovely, lovely folks here next time. Peace out. See you laters, alligators. Bye-bye, everyone.